Hello and welcome to Construction Executives Professional Education Series. You have joined the webinar titled Building the Foundations of the Future with Process Automation, sponsored by FlowForma. My name is Maggie Murphy and I'm the Managing Editor for Construction Executive, published by Associated Builders and Contractors. I'll be serving as the moderator of today's presentation. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers, Philip McCartney and Paul Stone. Phil has recently joined FlowForma as Vice President of Sales. He has a wealth of international experience in a career now spanning more than 20 years. Back living in Ireland, his main focus is in helping companies take the next step in their digital journey by embracing the no-code revolution and empowering their teams to digitize faster than ever. Paul Stone is a product strategist at FlowForma, the leading provider of no-code process automation tools. Paul uses his in-depth product and construction sector experience to support FlowForma's construction clients in achieving serious savings and competitive advantage. Paul is committed to empowering citizen developers to rapidly digitize their processes and manage them smarter and faster without using any software code. And now I'd like to hand it off to Phil.
Thank you, Maggie. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. As Maggie said, my name is Phil McCartney. I'm the VP of Sales here at FlowForma. As Maggie also said, I've only recently started in FlowForma. So I'd like to make a bit of a caveat before we begin. Whenever you hear me asking pretty simple, pretty dumb questions, that's not an act, okay? I'm still learning. I'm still on the trajectory of learning all about construction business, all about, process automation within there as well. So I'm going to be working with Paul today, and the whole idea of this session is really to build that sort of foundation about to truly automate construction businesses, to truly automate and digitize your business. We are not here to sell. We're not going to be doing the big sales pitch around FlowForma. Instead, we're here to give you the benefit of our expertise, our experience, certainly more Paul's experience than mine, and really sort of try and paint a picture of what we've learned from our clients, from the time we've spent in other sectors as well as construction, really understanding the issues around automation and digitization of your businesses. So let's move to the agenda. So this is what we're going to be looking at today. So the first thing we're going to look at is the current state of digital construction. Where is the sector? Where are you guys? What are the problems? What are the issues? And where are you on your digital journey, if you like? We're then going to use, as part of that, I'm going to give maybe a little bit of personal insight into what I've learned in the very short time and that I've been working with FlowForma and working specifically in the construction sector as well. We're then going to look at a survey that we actually that we invested in, and I think it was in the summer, and we're going to share some of the results from that survey. This survey was taken with people just like yourself, so decision makers in the construction sector. We were asking them questions about where they are on their journey, what are the issues they're facing and stuff. So some brilliant stuff in that survey, and Paul and I will talk about that as we go as well. Paul will then start to do some stuff on the strategic needs before he goes on to process trends in 2023. And then most importantly, we'll sort of work on how to get started. Now, there is a Q&A at the end, but actually we want this to be as interactive as possible. We want to hear from you guys. So on your GoToWebinar panel, you'll see two things. You'll see polls and you'll see chat. We'll be conducting polls as we go along. They're anonymous, so answer honestly, answer as honestly as you dare. But really, that's just to give us an idea of the people in the room, what's important to you. Paul and I will have some discussion around those polls and what we see on them, but also on the chat function as well. Please feel free to make comment, ask questions, dare I say it, even debate us a little bit. I'm not afraid of the odd debate. So if you see something that you may think differently on, please share it. We want this, as I said, the session to be as interactive as possible throughout the session. But at the end, we're definitely going to leave sort of 5 to 10 minutes for a Q&A where you can ask any and all questions that you think are pertinent today. So let's get started. The state of the current digital state of construction. So in a moment, I'm going to, as I said, sort of share with you guys a little bit about my personal journey in understanding construction and the challenges within it. I have never worked with the construction sector before, so it's been a very fast learning curve for me. But before we do that, I'd like to try and open up our first poll, please, Maggie, if we can open up our first poll, because we want to find out about what's going on, where you are on your journey. Where's your organization in terms of its digital transformation journey? It's, this is not about you personally on your journey. This is about where your organization is. So that poll is now open. You can find it in your GoToWebinar panel. It'd be great if you could go in and answer those the three options there in the poll, and just let us know about where your organization is in terms of its digital transformation journey. I'm going to hold that open for about 20 seconds. So I'm going to bring in Paul here very quickly. So 60% of you would say that digitization initiatives are among the main priorities of your business right now. Paul, this is pretty much standing up between what we've seen over the last 6 to 12 months, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We've really seen an uplift in the interest in construction companies in digitization. They're seeing that the technology is now available to really make a difference, to actually enable them to, carry out their operations faster and move more quickly, and then respond to change in the marketplace and deal with a lot of the challenges that they're having at the moment, like resource onboarding, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's definitely something that we're seeing a much stronger interest than ever before in digitization across construction. Yeah.
And it's really accelerating as well. I mean, we'll go into this in a little bit more detail when we look at our responses to our survey. But it seems to, from what I've been seeing, what I've been speaking to our clients over the last 6 to 12 months, that raising the bar of where it sits on the importance journey is just, it's just sort of shot up. And I suppose there's a number of things. There's COVID, there's other reasons, but it really has moved up the bar, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think we're really at a turning point here, where over the past 12 months, over the past 24 months, there's really been an upsurge in like the adoption of digital processes and digital tools in general across construction. It really does feel like it's a point where the industry is making a significant change. Because I remember many years ago, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, people were talking about it, but they weren't really doing much about it. But right now, they're definitely acting.
Yeah. I mean, from my own journey on this, there's me in New York, and that was me taking a rickshaw in New York, thinking it was a fast and inexpensive way to travel, and then someone charged me $70 for the privilege. I'm a big boy though, so they had a lot of pedaling to do. But it was in my second week in FlowForma where I was trying to understand, some of these challenges that we're seeing in the construction industry. And it was all very nice to go to New York and stuff, but there was two things that really started to give me insight. One, there was an awful lot of events on that week. So as I said, second week in the company, I was really trying to ramp up quickly. There was a number of events on in New York that week that we're talking about everything from the Inflation Reduction Act and what that meant and how to do that, how to adopt that. And a lot of the chat around that was about how they needed new digital processes and stuff to manage what was coming through there. But the most important part of my trip, I think, was our own breakfast briefing that we did at the Irish Consulate. And I mean, Paul, you look fantastic in your suit and stuff, standing up there presenting. But outside of the presentations and the great work one of our current clients, Sullivan Engineering, did in giving ideas about it, the real insight for me came from the chat that was happening around the room. People having coffees and breakouts and stuff, because here you had professionals in the construction industry just chatting idly and the same issues, sharing the same problems, the same pain points. Now, me as a sales guy, I'm trying to listen to the pain points and really understand, what they were. And, we made a list of some of the ones that we work with, but almost to a T, everything that the guys were talking about in the coffee breaks, just idly chatting about, were exactly the same. These common construction challenges that you guys on the webinar know inside and out. But to me as an outsider, it was amazing to hear where the construction industry was in terms of its journey. You know, where the problems with manual processes, one of the things I really remember was about problematic sites, about the challenges of, you know, keeping up to codes and standards and all of the things that you guys have to do. It was immense. And I mean, I'm watching these guys doing, you know, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks and talking about these huge process challenges. And it made it abundantly clear to me, you know, where FlowForma and platforms like that could come in and potentially solve some of these problems. I think, you know, before we sort of riff on this and you know, move on a bit, I'd love to take another poll, if you don't mind, Maggie, if you wouldn't mind setting up a poll. I'd love to hear from you guys about where your biggest obstacles are in terms of what your organization are facing. What are the biggest obstacles you're looking at right now? I'll flash this back up again so you can see. It might inspire you to see some of the options here. But, you know, if you don't mind just taking the poll now and tell us, you know, what are the things that are really the biggest obstacle that your organization is facing? Great, we can close that poll now. Thank you everyone for answering, that's great. Paul, again, just gonna bring you in. Yeah, there it is. You know, 43% on those manual processes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not surprised at all by those answers, those poll results. Certainly, manual processes are a real bugbear for people, especially, you know, since we've had the pandemic and so on. It's been an even bigger problem than ever, and it's definitely impacting the smooth execution of projects, and definitely have an impact. Also, it's interesting to see that adoption is number two, because with many people investing in digital technologies, they're finding it hard to get it adopted by the workforce. And at the end of the day, of course, a system that's not adopted is not giving you the benefits at the end of the day. So a combination of manual processes and adoption of new technologies, yeah, that's a story that we're hearing again and again from construction clients, and something that we look to address in every project that we begin and execute. But
Yeah,
certainly.
it does seem to be the tipping point for manual processes now, and I think, you know, again, pandemic and stuff has brought different things into our personal lives, and you know, a new way of looking at digital and how it is a lifeboat for certain situations, and how it can just change the way you see the world slightly when you're forced into a more digital focused view of the world, you know, by a pandemic. And I think now manual processes are just, whilst they have been allowed to happen, I think is probably the best way in the past. I think now it's like, well, why? Why are we doing these things? So this is great. Thank you so much for taking part in these polls. This is, you know, incredibly interesting to us, and it's sort of obviously on these sort of sessions, there's a little bit of quid pro quo. We want to give you an awful lot of data, which we're just about to do, but to receive, you know, where your thoughts are, where your challenges are for us in the form of polls is incredibly interesting. So thank you for taking part in the polls and letting us know where your challenges are. As an organization, FlowForma, you know, we work in multiple sectors. So we work in insurance, finance, and many other sectors globally. We, you know, when we made the decision to move into construction in a much bigger way, you know, the first thing we did was we really wanted to know at a very deep level what were those challenges. So it's, as I said, we really relished looking at this data, looking at the polls, listening to you guys, understanding where your challenges are. But we wanted to put our money where our mouth is. So we commissioned a survey. And as I said, it's 100 construction decision makers that we surveyed. And really, we wanted to find out three core things. We wanted to find out a little bit what we looked at there, the current challenges. What are the challenges construction's facing? What are the pain points? What's going on there? We also wanted to understand how technology plays a role in the response to these challenges. So what's going on right now? How are you using technology? And then a little bit to what we saw there about adopting new technology and stuff. You know, what's the desire in your business and in the sector in general to broaden those digital capabilities? Like, what's the thinking? What's the feeling? Do they want to move down the road a little bit? I'm going to bring Paul in a little bit more now as we start to look at some of these results. So this is the first one. This is looking at, you know, where construction is. Where are they right now? And Paul, is sort of weirdest thing that I maybe because I've worked in digital for so long, but you know, this huge slew of companies that are still, the majority of processes are managed on paper, email, and spreadsheets. And that key stat, the 57% of respondents saying that their organization's processes are managed in outdated ways. I mean, this is what you're seeing day to day when you're working with our clients, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is quite a surprising statistic that, over half of the construction companies surveyed said over half their processes were running inefficiently and using outdated mechanisms. But having said that, it's not too surprising to us. We're seeing it every day when we speak to our construction clients that they're really desperate to actually improve the way the processes are executed. Their processes are typically executed either on pieces of paper or using email chains, maybe using a spreadsheet to track progress. And all those methods are very prone to error. And it's very difficult to capture valuable data that can be used later on for data analytics to make better decisions. So it's really surprising that there's so many processes within the organizations that are actually not digitized in any meaningful way. Now, I know people might say, oh, well, we're using email, that's digital, right? No, it's not really. It's not really capturing the data. It's an unreliable communication mechanism. You really need to use something a bit better to actually be able to track those processes and make them run efficiently in your organization. And that's what's not happening half the time in half the organizations. So yeah, it's really surprising to see the statistic so large. But at the same time, I would say, in our everyday discussions with construction companies, that's exactly what we hear from them. So yeah, not too surprising to us again.
It's not, but when we showed this slide in New York, it really resonated because with a lot of the audience, because it was when you have a very complex project, as you say, email folds in on itself because it's so difficult to track exactly where things were changed, what happened, etc., etc. I mean, that was the thing that really got me, was because I don't have to work on massively complex projects. So email can work fine 70% of the time for me, but I don't work in these industries with massive complexity. And I thought that was a big moment for me when everyone was nodding, saying, yeah, email's a nightmare. It's not a helpful tool at all.
Yeah, that's it. And you have to keep track of it almost in your mind, because you have to remember that, oh, you sent an email on Monday there to somebody and they haven't got back to you, so they're not going to be there on Friday to do that piece of work. And you have to keep kind of, reminding yourself to remind them to carry out the work. So you're chasing people all the time. It's just not a great way to run your business, because, really having an automated system that actually prompts people to do the work all the time is the way to go, so that you can focus in on what you're doing right now, getting your job done, rather than constantly reminding other people to get their job done, if you like. So yeah, absolutely. Like email as a tracking mechanism really just doesn't work too well at all. And spreadsheets are not a whole lot better. At the end of the day, those spreadsheets have to be kept up to date to make them useful. So it's an overhead that you've got to bear in mind all the time. So
it's sort of digitization light.
digitization light is a great way to put it. Great way to put it, Phil. Yeah, absolutely.
The next question that we asked was, what outcomes are important to your organization when digitizing? And Paul, this improved safety comes out top on this. I mean, just firstly, is that only pertinent to the construction industry, or have we seen that elsewhere?
It's an interesting one, actually. Safety is one of our top use cases across all different sectors. So likes of incident management, safety reporting, safety observations, NCOs, they all come in under the same umbrella. And you know what? It's a very common need for process optimization across, in any industry, but absolutely in construction, it is number one. So again, not a surprise to see that come out top here as an area that people want to focus on in terms of, digitization. What would they like to digitize most? They want to digitize their safety procedures and quality procedures.
Yeah, and it's so close on the quality as well, isn't it? Like it's sort of neck and neck there, and I think a lot of that goes hand in hand. One thing that I would suggest will be rising the more knowledge the sector gets on automation would be about increasing operational efficiencies. That's quite high up the percentiles here, but that's kind of our core, isn't it? Like that's ultimately what we're trying to do in FlowForma, is increase operational efficiency.
Indeed, and by having digital processes in place, you're able to automatically move processes on from one resource to the next resource and so on. So no matter where they are, whether they're on site, whether they're back in the head office, you know, they're automatically prompted that they've got a piece of work that they have to do. So
Yeah,
this really accelerates the processes inside your organization. And it'll also, by digitizing them as well, it allows you to track them automatically. So it's not a case of you updating that spreadsheet to keep track of the status of things. You can actually see that status in real time automatically, and that really helps with your efficiency. And what we've seen as well is that in the coming year, you know, a lot of construction companies are seeing that there's potential for great growth in their operations, and improving efficiencies really enables that growth to happen. So it's definitely something that's high on the agenda for the construction companies that we talk to.
yeah. So, the outcomes, this is what we, when we start working with a client, we look at quite closely. And again, I'm going to just bring up another poll, Maggie, if you don't mind setting the poll up. We're interested to know what outcomes are important to your organization when digitizing. What are the outcomes we're looking for? So is it safety? Is it quality? Is it worker time? Better customer experiences, or increasing those operational efficiencies? It's all anonymous, so you don't have to automatically go to safety. It's okay. You're in a safe environment. Please answer what do you think? Wow, very interesting. Wow, okay, 63% looking about increasing operational efficiencies. Yeah, I
Wow.
mean, well, that's really interesting. And I think that might pertain to the people in the room, Paul, that these are
Mm.
people who are obviously, when we look at that first poll, 70 odd whatever percent are looking, that this is a critical need now for their businesses. And that would sort of probably hit on my point about the fact that if you're further down the line, operational efficiency starts to become top of the tree, right?
That was really interesting to see that result, that operational efficiencies were actually so high in relation to everything else, because I was expecting to have a more even response, where, you know, there was kind of everything was roughly equal, but it was fantastic to see that result and show real focus on operational efficiencies. So it's great to see that, and it's great to see that people realize that, you know, that they are inefficient, because often people will look to their systems and they'll say, oh well, you know, we've got digital systems, we've got communication mechanisms, they're good enough. But I think what people are really doing in construction right now is they're realizing that it's not good enough. You actually have to make use of those technologies that are there to keep pace with the market, to keep pace against your competitors, etc. And also to, like I said earlier on, to handle that future growth. So it's great to see that such a high number. And of course, Phil, we're very well placed to assist with that.
Of course we are. Of course we are. That's interesting that we're fine sort of an idea that we've seen in numerous times when we can identify a real problem. We're fine, we're fine, we're fine, and then all of a sudden it's panic mode. And we quite often get customers coming in panic mode, which is fine, we can help with that. But it's, guys, you'd be in less of a panic had you identified the problem 6 months or a year ago, which is what you should have really done. Interesting, very interesting results. Um, the third one, so we're going to do four of these. So the third one is, so in the last one we were looking at outcomes. Now we ask, thinking about your organization's business processes, which of the following activities would you classify as a priority for process optimization and automation? Again, Paul, health and safety coming out on top there only just, but we've seen this across a number of sectors. This just doesn't pertain to construction, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Health and safety just comes across number one all the time. And I think people consider it as a must-have. So you simply must address health and safety, right? It's a mandatory thing. It's not an optional. It's not an option, right? What's
Yeah.
interesting in this poll, I feel, is how high procurement, supply chain, and onboarding are in the process list. Because what we're seeing with construction companies is that these are really high priorities for them. Supply chain at the moment, as everybody realizes, is becoming increasingly difficult to manage because of all the price increases in basic supplies and so on. So managing that supply chain is really important, becoming more and more important, managing it efficiently, being able to switch between different suppliers easily and so on as availability and prices are changing. That's just so important. And I think what people are finding is that right now, the systems that they have in place to support that are just not good enough. They're not reactive enough. They're not able to change quickly enough to allow them to manage their supply chain in the way that they need to maintain their project budgets and so on. And then with onboarding, sorry, Phil, I don't know if you want to jump in
No,
there.
no, 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 no.
So with onboarding, again, we're seeing resource shortages across the board on construction projects, and everybody is trying to grab staff when they're needed for their projects. And we have lots of examples of that in construction. I'd say that it actually maybe next to health and safety, onboarding is probably our biggest use case in construction, where
Yeah,
people are onboarding contractors and suppliers. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say that that's kind of the bread and butter, isn't it? I mean, typically when we do a first process through the Sure Start and stuff, contract onboarding and contractor onboarding and stuff tends to be that bread and butter process that everyone likes to get in there because they see massive value on it. But
Yeah.
some of the, it's hard to say the word sexy when we're talking about business processes, but some of the ones that I think have really captured the imagination of some of our construction clients are around stuff like subcontractor submittals, compliance, regulatory stuff. That I think just by the nature of automation, where you have, really well-defined filing protocols and all of these things, where where things are, and you can instantly refer to, whether it's something to do with safety or something to do with legalities or insurance or stuff. That's been an area where I think that's been the real, that solves, huge problems. I think there's almost like a bread and butter expectation at the top end that we should be able to do that.
Yeah.
Some of these other ones I think have been the more interesting conversations for me.
Oh yeah, sure. The one right down at the bottom of the list, bid management, that's really significant. And like if you talk to certain sectors, especially like the civil sector, where they're trying to take advantage of new government funding and so on, they're having to go through tender processes, etc. Bid management for those guys is really important. So I think in different areas of construction, these processes have higher relevance. So maybe in the civils, bid management is a higher priority for them, while in the maintenance providers, subcontractors, fleet management is a big thing. So
Yeah.
it depends if you could subdivide this list down to into individual sectors, you might see a different set of priorities by different sector, But as you
No,
say,
for
the bread
sure.
and butter stuff is at the top.
Yeah. And then finally, what are the biggest obstacles standing in the way of your company's digital transformation? I mean, this is, something, whoops, sorry. This is something that I see a lot of in terms of, speaking to my customers and potential customers. The IT talent question, I mean, effectively FlowForma was built on the premise that IT talent was always going to be shrinking, and that's why we built a no-code solution about empowering, the industry. But so I find it, very reassuring that the construction sector saw that was, a massive obstacle, and you would actually probably include the second one as well, the internal talent and the recruited IT talent. Like they're one and the same in a lot of ways, Paul. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely. So to implement systems that are actually going to track and change your business, it's not usually an easy thing, and therefore you're looking to use internal IT resources, but they're just not available. They either don't exist or they're just not available. The other thing is if you're looking for like package-based solutions, you can go to market for those, but they're very expensive. They take a lot of time and expertise to implement. So
Yeah.
really traditional kind of IT solutions to your problems using your own IT staff, using IT vendors, they're not really delivering the change that you need quickly enough. And there's significant problems in terms of resourcing there. So you need to get those IT staff in, or you need to contract a vendor, which could be very expensive. So these are real challenges right now in construction, I feel, even
Yeah.
though there are more
I'll
systems
touch on
available.
it. Well, that's true, but I'll touch on the internal champion bit further down the line, because I think that's a whole other thing that we probably advise on. So look, that's our survey, and right now I want to hand over to Paul. Paul's going to take you through some of the strategic needs of the construction sector and stuff. But just we'll be making, I think, these slides available to you. The construction survey results are very good for building that sort of internal agreement on what's important and why it's important. So feel free, you can download that survey from our site as well. We'll make sure it's available to you guys as those slides will be as well. Paul, I'm going to hand over to you, and you're going to take us through these 3 strategic needs.
Sure. So we're going to talk about the strategic needs of the industry, and we're breaking them up into 3 different sections. So first of all is those operational efficiencies, increasing operational efficiency so that you can better handle change within your business. And that change might be increased growth, it might be change in regulations, for example, or change in the supply chain that you're having to deal with. So what we'd suggest as a way forward on this is to focus in on business process, to actually improve the business processes in your organization and take a process first view on all of this. So rather than thinking of it necessarily as a technical problem, think of it as the way you actually operate your business. What steps do you need to take to actually make a change, to make a positive change? And think less maybe of the technical infrastructure that you currently have, or maybe your suppliers have, and so on. Think about the process first and foremost, because the processes can be something that's actually very easy to change, right? And the way to do that is to deliver a system that can be adopted quickly by your workforce. So I know that earlier on in one of our slides, one of our polls, it was highlighted that adoption was a significant challenge. Well, you need to deliver a system that actually works with your workers and actually benefits your workers, provides direct benefit to your workers. You can also deliver a system where your workers actually feel a sense of ownership of that system, which really helps to them to adopt. You have to reduce your IT dependency, because if you're waiting on IT to make those changes, it's going to take a long time or never going to happen. You need to actually consider alternative approaches that actually allow you to do that quickly. And then, of course, monitor that performance improvement. So as you focus in on improving your performances, improving your processes, monitor the performance of those processes, and use that as a selling feature to build momentum within your organization for change. Next thing there is customer satisfaction. So you also need to focus on customer satisfaction by improving your quality and communicating that back to the customer. Keep an eye on what you're doing and be able to report back to the customer, hey, this is the progress that we're making, this is the benefit that we're bringing to you, so that the customer will give you positive feedback and positive references and so on. This is something that maybe hasn't happened actually so much in construction, because it's so based on interpersonal relationships. And really, when you look at customers, they're becoming more demanding now. They're asking you to evidence the work that you did and show how you're progressing according to contract, etc. The last point there is better decision making. So one of the top things that we keep hearing in construction is analytics. We want to capture more data. We want to analyze that data. And there are systems that will capture a certain amount of data. So for example, your accounting system captures your invoices, your credit notes, and so on. But really what you want to do is capture detail on the activity of the resources in your business, so they can monitor the activities and how they're working towards achieving goals, business goals, project goals, etc. So that you can analyze how your resources are working and how efficiently they're working. Also, with data, you can find those broken processes, find out processes in your organization that are broken at a certain step, let's say, analyze that detail and refine those processes to make them run smoothly and efficiently. And ultimately as well, you also want to connect systems together. So you might have several different systems in operation in your business, and the business processes are running across those different systems. You want to connect that full sequence together so that data is transferred smoothly between the different systems and the human resources working on the project.
Just to go on that for 2 seconds. Sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
Paul, but
No.
It was interesting again for me, the first point and the last point. So we connect obviously into numerous different systems by an open API. And as a salesperson, I find that fantastic, because the more systems you connect into, the more valuable you are to an organization. But it was Paul, and I rarely give Paul any credit, but I should give him credit for this, who educated me on our process first approach, because this has been, again, a big game changer for me in really understanding this. what Paul and his team do is ensure that all of our customers take a process first approach. That is to say that they stand back and as a business, they understand what do they want to do? What are the actual things that they want to do? What is the process that they want, the outcomes that they want, irrespective of the systems that they're currently using. So almost like an agnostic viewpoint. And I think it's so important, Paul, that if we're going to give away one thing on this webinar, that process first approach, where you literally strip everything back and say, what do we want to happen? How do we want it to happen? And then layer your systems in on top of that as the second point is really the key to making this all work, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, because your processes are all about your resource utilization, and you want to gain the maximum benefit out of those resources that you possibly can to enable you to change in the future, basically, to grow and so on. So yeah, focusing in on process really focuses in on what your business is actually doing day to day, and how your resources are working together or maybe not working together, so that you can improve those processes over time and get more from the existing pool of people that you have. So yeah, process first is definitely the way to go. And you know what? It's not that hard. It's easy. It doesn't need IT resources, etc. You can do it.
Yeah, that's so true. So we're now going to look at, Paul's going to just give us an idea, an example of what a process looked like before digitization and then after. So Paul, this process was what again? I can't remember.
Yeah, this process was permit to dig. So it's permit to dig that's used in a large transport civil construction company, and it well, I'm sure everybody's familiar with what a permit to dig is. I won't bother explaining that. But if you look at the existing permit to dig process that was in the company already, these were the kind of problems that they were having. Well, there was lots of emails flying around as people were chasing permits to find out the status. There was no visibility of who had the ball at any point in time, so it was difficult to find out what exactly, so where the permit was at this point in time. And of course, you need the permit to actually carry out your construction work. So that was rather a big deal. And this was causing the project to be delayed because you didn't know if you had the permit or you didn't, or where it was. And at the end of the day, that was costing you money. And everybody knows delays cost you money. And having permits issued at the right time and so on is really key to keeping the project running smoothly and on time. Also, data wasn't being captured, it was being recorded on pieces of paper. So this is what the process looked like after digitization. The process was kicked off by an electronic form that captured all the requirements for the permit, and then that was submitted for issuance, for the permit to be issued, and ultimately the approval process was all tracked so that the person who requested the permit would know exactly where it was, who had the ball, and if it wasn't running on time or if it was delayed. Ultimately, at the end of the day, then, once the permit was issued, it could be referenced back into the GIS system, so they could quickly see that the permit was issued appropriately. If we move on to the next one, Phil, maybe. So this example here is also from actually from the same company, where they wanted to do a job record and timesheets. So they came about a process, put about a process whereby they actually inducted new contractors or employees onto the project through an electronic form that they could fill in before they actually had access to any of the company systems, because it was available on a public link. So they could fill in that form really quickly and easily. And then once that form was completed, they were registered as being accessed. So registered as being an employee working on that project, and they were able to sign in and sign out of the project, and ultimately be able to record the work that they were doing on the project as well. And all of this was held in a central database quickly and easily. And that information was then ultimately sent on to the payroll department for processing so that the resources could be paid. Now, you might notice at the end of this process here, there's a piece where it seems to be generating Word documentation. And that Word documentation was automatically generated by the system and then used by the payroll provider to actually generate the payments to the employees. You might think, hang on a second, the perfect system would have that integrated so that it would automatically be integrated into payroll. But what people found was they could put this process together really, really quickly, and that integration piece at the end provided only a small additional benefit. So therefore, actually getting that process of inducting the employee, getting them on the register, recording all their work and hours, and then pushing it out into paper generated massive benefits over what they were doing previously, which was manually filled pieces of paper that were being passed around between people. There was a really significant benefit from this. Interestingly, these two processes were covered off in one of our other webinars from a company called Downer, and that's available on our website if you want to see more detail. If you jump onto the third slide there, Phil. This slide here simply shows what you get as an output ultimately of your digitization process. You get reporting. So this lovely dashboard it's a live dashboard that came from a very large product called the A14 project in the UK, where they were working on a 30-mile section of freeway, upgrading it. And again, it relates to permit to dig in this case. And what they were able to do was aggregate all the permits across this entire 30-mile section of freeway. So they could see a complete view of progress across the entire project. Now, this was a very large project. It was in excess of 4 years in duration, with over 2,500 people working on the project over the course of the project. So really, there were a great deal of permits that were issued. I don't have the total number to hand, but it was, I think, in a case in somewhere in the region of 30,000. So having this ability to aggregate, to collect and aggregate all of this information across a very large project with multiple sections and so on was a real benefit. And I think this really helps people make decisions and have an overview of how the project was progressing on this key metric, the issuing of permits. And while we're talking here about permits to dig, everybody on the call, I would guess, would know that permits are a really significant part of construction, that it doesn't just apply to permits to dig, it's permits to do this, permits to do that. And having the ability to capture information electronically, process that information and get it approved, and then possibly generate an automatic email or an automatic document at the end that actually says, hey, here's your permit to carry out this piece of work, is something that's really significant and an area that could be greatly improved in most construction companies.
Very good. I'm just conscious, because I've been interrupting you the whole time, Paul. I'm conscious of time because we could riff on these for some time. But can we just go through just a couple of the automation trends for 2023 and get your take on some of the three main ones?
Sure, I'll keep it brief because I just realized our time is running away quickly. So one of the things that we're finding is that documentation is being generated digitally. So in the past, we were talking about pieces of paper, but actually, you know what? You can record data on an electronic form just as easily, and you can do that on a mobile device. You can do it on a desktop. Wherever you're working, you can basically capture that information, and also you can generate the relevant documentation that you need. So if you have a customer, for example, who have set certain demands in your contract that says you must generate this and that document, you can generate those documents automatically and store them. So I think that's really important that you have tools that are available wherever you are, whether you're on a mobile device or whether you're on a desktop, that can record the information and then generate all the relevant communications automatically for you, including any required documentation. And ultimately, all that data that's being captured enables you to have analytics. So that's kind of the area that everybody wants to hear. They want to have better data so they can make better decisions on the progress of their project, and also better forward decisions 6 months, 12 months down the line in terms of what resources they need to have, whether that's people or whether that's materials. Having the analytics and all the data to back those decisions up is really significant. And you're only going to get that if you digitize and start capturing that data electronically. So capture the data, raw data electronically, so you can analyze it and make better future decisions in terms of your resourcing.
Yeah, and the mobile first thing is really pertinent to construction as well. I mean, we see that on site, requests for things happening on site, et cetera, and I think that pertains to exactly the point. When you're capturing the data properly across the organization, whether it's back office or on site or whatever, the analytics get better and better.
Absolutely, and interesting. We work in a few different sectors, but in construction has driven our development of mobile technology. So very much we've improved our mobile technology twofold at the very least, based on the requirements of from our construction clients.
Great. So how to get started? So we'll go through this and then we'll get into the key takeaways and the Q&A. You know, for me, and I just wanted to pick up on this point because in one of the surveys we looked at, 14% talked about, you know, not having an internal champion in the business. I think this is critical, and actually those champions exist in construction more so than in a lot of sectors, because you have guys and girls in your businesses that understand how to run a project, how to take something from A through to Z and get things done. And that to me is always the best type of champion. You know, someone who is not just going to sell digitization to the business, but who's actually going to industrialize what your digital tools into the business to drive adoption, drive training, and change the core of your business. Like that's always our big problem, isn't it, Paul? To find that right person to drive the change internally.
Yeah, definitely. But like you said, in construction, it's all about getting things done. And there's plenty of people in construction who want to get the job done, right? And we
Yeah,
do find that we can find, or the construction companies can find these people who desperately want to make improvements, who are very aware of how they work. So it's unlike like some services companies, for example, financial services companies and so on, like the individual people and at desks are not so aware of, if you like, how they work, the bigger picture. We don't find that in construction. We find that people in construction generally understand how they work, what needs to be done to get the job done. So they actually know their processes. They know their processes pretty well, which is a great starting
yeah,
point. And they are keen to champion digitization.
yeah. And I think that sort of, you know, also hits on the training people to help themselves. I think one of the reasons why our adoption rate has been so good in construction is because people are coming from that. I know this process, I know it well, and I want to do this and have this automated and get it off my desk and move on
Yeah.
to the next one. Yeah, that training people, which obviously suits the sort of FlowForma ethos. Um, just on the process first approach again, Paul, like, you know, I'm the biggest fan of this approach because I think it makes an awful lot of sense. But, you know, in terms of getting started on that process first, what's a bit of your advice on that? Like, what's the first thing you would say for someone to do when they're taking that approach?
Yeah, well, I think there's a point a little bit later on, target the obvious, which ties in with this, because really it's like people in construction especially understand their processes. They really do, and they know their biggest pain points. They're very quick to give answers on that whenever I speak to them. So they tend to know where to go first to make the biggest impact. And if you focus in on digitizing the process first, it really can give measurable results and very quick, rapid return on investment. So with
Yeah,
tools like FlowForma, for example, you can digitize processes in kind of 4 to 6 weeks, and you can get it out there and actually get measurable return from that point onwards. So if you focus on process, digitize the process, and measure the return, it's really it is a very good way to go, because measuring that return demonstrates the value and builds momentum in the company for broader change. Okay, and the thing to do there as well is to avoid getting bogged down in things like integrations, which you absolutely can do. It certainly adds a certain level of value and all that, but it can be a stumbling block. So if you digitize a process and then think, oh well, yeah, but I've got to integrate into my back end, it's just so important, it can really slow you down. And what we find, and the feedback from our customer base, is that the most successful way, most successful approach is actually focus on digitizing the process and come back to the integrations as like a second phase. And that generates the best return on investment.
yeah, and not demonstrating that ROI quickly. I mean, we put a lot into that proof of value workshops and stuff like this, but I think once you can clearly show the financial officers, the CEOs, the owners, the immense return on investment of
Yeah.
just one process, off one flow, it just kicks off. You then have that sort of, big C-suite buy-in, and off you go. It tends to light the touch paper fairly quick when you see the savings that can be made.
Absolutely.
The involving external suppliers and contractors to help some has worked really well, because again, I think maybe that's a very FlowForma thing, because we've the ability to have externals come into processes and come out without extra cost. I think that has added a massive, a massive part of our growth. I think that's been a big part of it, and it just seems to be adopted really well whenever the externals are brought in early.
Yeah, absolutely. So people see this as a pain point all the time, that the interactions with their suppliers, contractors, subcontractors, and so on, this is often a bottleneck in their process. So having the systems to reach out to those external parties and interact with them really increases the efficiency of any process that's affected. So
Yeah.
like, it's not surprising that in our construction customer base, I think pretty much every single customer that we have in construction has actually built processes that interact with those external parties,
Yeah.
because it just generates so much value. It's a real selling point then to the board, etc., to be able to say that you've now got digital processes that you're working with those suppliers and improving your supply chain across the board. Really helps.
Yeah. So, key takeaways before we go on into questions. Look, we've seen that, digital process automation, there's plenty of ROI, there's plenty of benefits to it. I think the main parts should be that, look, it isn't that hard. And, one of the things that we always say to prospects and people coming to us is get going on it. Paul's constantly saying, just get that first one done, because we've moved forward now in terms of, these are not, it is not this ginormous project that needs millions and millions of people on it just to get to stage one. It's completely different. It is an iterative process. It is a growth process within your company that should go over a number of years. So get going. The tools that are out there, FlowForma and others, make it easy for you to get that first process done, bed it in. So you start, the more you're going to save. And because you're not dependent, certainly in no-code resources, you're not dependent on IT resources there, it's easier to get going. We don't need a million meetings about a million meetings about a million meetings. The way to get everybody on board is to get it firmed up and get one process in the bag started. And, we feel that from the feedback we've been getting, customers, employees, everything it's been super positive coming back from our construction clients. It's been thanked across the board. Any other takeaways from you, Paul, before I open up the floor for some questions?
No, I just reiterate that last point there with customers. Like, we've have clients who've digitized processes across the board. They've taken a big bang approach where they've gone to 40 processes or whatever, and then they've noticed like very shortly afterwards positive feedback from the customers. Like, they saw a 50% reduction in customer complaints, for example. So we can talk about these use cases some other day, but that's a really significant side benefit of digitization. You might be focusing on efficiency, but what you may not realize is you're having this really positive effect with your customers.
Yeah. Okay, Maggie, I think we're open to some questions now.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you both. Got a few questions in here. I'll start with, what processes do you believe are worth prioritizing for automation, specifically for construction companies?
Yeah, I can take that one. So what we definitely see for construction companies is onboarding is a very big, resource onboarding, human resource onboarding is a really big area, and pretty much every single construction company digitizes that process. It's either the first one or it's one of the first ones that they work on. The second one that I'd say is probably, if you look at supply chain and supplier onboarding, that also this is something very significant and very relevant right now. The third one is safety, simply because safety is something that everybody has to do. It's mandatory. Depending on the area of construction you're in, it's either more or less important. And then the fourth, I'm just going to throw in a fourth one, which is to say quality checks. So what we found is that where people have used FlowForma to implement quality checking, they've seen significant benefits, and it ties in with that last point on customer relationship. Really helps with customer relations. So I don't know if that's probably enough.
Yeah, I think
Very
that's
amount of
pretty
time.
well. Thank you. The next question I have here is if you could give a specific example of an ROI that you've calculated and how you determined that ROI.
Well, that's definitely for you, Paul.
Yeah, so we have a number of customers that have actually gone and done this themselves. So rather than let us do it, they've gone ahead and done it themselves because they've gone on initiatives to actually digitize their processes, and they've actually taken it upon themselves to sell what they're doing internally, right? So one of the things that FlowForma does automatically is that it automatically tracks progress of projects, and it will tell you, sorry, tracks progress of processes, and it will tell you exactly how long different steps in the process take. And it will also analyze resource usage to find out, what resources that may be taking a little longer to do things. So it analyzes all of this stuff for you and churns it out so that you can quickly see how processes are performing. And you can use that to show the difference of the improvement in your processes and how they worked in the past and how they are working post-digitization. So people have actually gone and measured this, and the system makes it easy to do that, and they use that to sell internally. But if you want to talk specific figures, like we have a project there, VA14, I would have mentioned earlier on, and they digitized over 76 processes. One of those processes, targeted risk monitoring, they calculated it as saving 37,000 British pounds on that one process alone. The permit to dig process, remember I said they'd issued about 30,000 permits? They calculated they saved over 2 million on that particular process over the lifetime of the project. So the savings can be really significant. It does vary depending on the process, depending on the size of the organization, but it really can be very significant, and it can be made easy to measure. Why? Because the system automatically captures the metrics that you need to make those calculations.
Great, thank you. So again, this is a little bit construction specific, but some construction companies have a lot of employees who are working on job sites that may have very shoddy or just no internet, period. Is that something that your app can support?
Yeah, so our mobile application, so the way our system works is that everything's stored in a central database, and you know what, our typical mode of access is you access via a web browser, which works fine when you're back in the office. But our mobile application, which like I said is particularly successful in construction, has an offline ability, so they can actually fill in a form or a process step while you're on site when the system is actually offline, and then synchronize it back when you're back online again. So you can capture data out in the field and then synchronize it when you've got connectivity again. And this is obviously a key thing for construction because those mobile devices, they're in the hands of site workers and they're not going to have connectivity. For example, we have a large client in the UK where they're doing a tunneling project, and obviously when they're down in the tunnel, they have no connectivity at all. So they use the mobile device to capture the data, and then they synchronize it while they're back connected again.
Got it. Okay. Switching gears a little bit here, we have an attendee who's asked if you're open to working with universities to prepare construction-specific case studies.
Yeah, we're always open. We're working with a couple of universities at the moment. Isn't that right, Paul? I think we
Yeah,
have.
absolutely. Yeah. No, we definitely will be open to that.
Great.
Happy to.
Okay. You touched on this a little bit earlier, Paul, but with your specific example of the ROI for that one company, but give us a little bit broader sense of how you can quantify the value that digitization can bring to an organization.
Yeah, so it's really you need to look at what we tend to do to quantify it is to look at the duration of the process, so that you're actually quantifying it in terms of man hours saved. So like I was saying earlier on, the system will give you metrics that help with that quantification, and then you simply need to multiply the duration, the reduction in duration, by the man hours of the resources that you're utilizing and the appropriate pay rates and so on. So that's how it's been done by our customers in the past. Now we have a whole series of case studies that are available on our website where we can provide you with those specific calculations, and because different customers have done it in different ways. So they're all doing, if you like, an exercise to sell the idea internally in their organization. As I say, they're not using us to make these calculations, they're doing it themselves. They take slightly different approaches, but all of the approaches align on a couple of things. So they're looking at the resource utilization, the duration of the processes, how digitization has reduced that duration, and then multiplying the difference by essentially the number of man hours. So that's essentially what they're all doing. And as I said, we've got some case studies that actually give you some worked examples, which we're happy to provide to you.
Wonderful. Well, I think that about wraps it up for our Q&A, so I would just toss it back to the both of you for any closing comments.
No, listen, thank you so much for everyone for attending today. It's been great for us to see some of the feedback via the polls, and that, you know, we'll have a post webinar survey. We'd love to hear more from you. Feel free to either get in touch with me directly for a one-to-one chat, tell me what you're thinking, what you're doing, or feel free to book a demo as well. Also, if you want to see how fantastically wonderful we are, feel free to look us up on G2. Read some of the reviews.
All right. Thank you both. Thanks, FlowForma, for sponsoring this webinar. And Paul, Philip, thank you for your expertise and your experience that you've shared with us today. Please take a moment to subscribe to Construction Executive if you haven't already, and follow us on social media from constructionexec.com. Also, please consider subscribing to our weekly newsletter, CE This Week, to be notified of upcoming webinars. Thank you very much for your time and attention today. Bye-bye.